And I think before diving into plans and designing and shifting in space, I think having a common vision or ambition, which can be layered, it doesn't need to be one, it can be multiple, and it can be clear in principles. I think that can really create a leverage to start designing the project in a holistic or integrated way.
What I believe in is that there should be looked after a situation whereby the infrastructure today is no longer considered as detrimental only, but there is a process which is engaged both with the technicians, both with the stakeholders, with the city, with the federal government, with the railways, whomever are the partners, and of course with the citizens or its delegation, in order to create a better solution of which everybody is benefiting.
And my PhD has been about the integration of infrastructure, and I prepared a couple of nice slides for you guys. As I said, I'm running a small team at the University of Antwerp. This is my team. We are running it with 3 professors. We have about 15 researchers. And one of the topics we aim to address the most is infrastructure and mobility, and especially the integration of large-scale infrastructure projects. And I've been writing and teaching about it for about 15 years now. These are the several publications I had the pleasure to issue. I also saw that in your case, train infrastructure is very prominent. One of my latest books was on the transformation of rail stations, and another one with the TU Delft on how we can transform small train stations in larger regions. How can we reconnect them with the neighborhood? And finally, I'm also advisor to several mayors and aldermen in Flemish cities, where I try to consult them on the integration of infrastructure. And this one is for the city of Ostend, where we looked at the biggest infrastructure scars running through the city and try to downsize them, adapt them more to the local situation, and return them in something more than merely infrastructure. And
the major element, of course, is that if you have this neighborhood on the left, you obtain a park of about 100 meters deep, in the middle of it having the river, so creating a sort of a valley, which then at the same time is used as a noise barrier towards towards the area. And well, if you have this kind of an impression, it's using the existing investments needed in infrastructure to create a situation which basically makes the area better.
We've been involved in multiple phases of transport infrastructure, both from the initial phase of envisioning mobility as something that is more than something functional, but something that can really create a leverage for the city and other neighborhoods. It started around 2012, 2010 with a project in Bordeaux in France, where 50,000 new housing units would need structural planning to be implemented across the region based on a new mobility system. This mobility system, which today was very car dependent, or at the time very car dependent, would also need to make a shift to alternative mobility and more public transport. So this is where we got involved in one of the first projects to think on what can infrastructure mean for the city beyond the functional aspect of a built network. we also looked into the notion or the potential of the built networks that mobility infrastructure brings along, both highway, public transports, soft networks, etc., and to see them more as something that can be used as an operation to improve the city rather than something that you just need to implement and make it functional.
The first phase in the process is, which I found crucial in most of the projects, is to find a common ground. And finding or gathering neutral expertise which isn't biased, is often a key in my humble experience. And I was responsible in trying to look at the health perspective. What is the impact of infrastructure on the health of the local people? And it was an important trigger to combine all the different disciplines, all the different sectors to work together, from ecology over urban development, the financial experts, but also the different administrations. I'm sure also in Germany and Berlin, there's a lot of institutes, a lot of governments involved in that kind of big infrastructure. And the challenge was to make them work together. Secondly, and to timing, I think what's very important is that you should celebrate a lot. Celebrate every small step you make, every small success. That's a returning success factor I've discovered in most of the infrastructure projects, because especially infrastructure projects, they have such a long planning phase, but also a very long construction phase. It's very easy to get lost in time, to get lost over the different elections, other ambitions. Ambitions change. Other promises are made, so it's important to keep everybody in the same direction, and that everybody is still enthusiastic over a longer term of project. And celebrating your success is very important. And third point is the funding. I'd like to come back to your question on financing. Match your promises with secured funding, not only on the short term, but also on the long term. And that's one of the critiques we're having now in Antwerp, that it's unprecedented that the Flemish government issued such a big amount of money, and the 1.25 billion for the covering of the ring road in the first phase. But a lot of people are very critical that it's gonna stop there, that we'll have a big tunnel with little pieces of park, but then it's gonna stop because there just isn't enough money to cover the entire ring road.
In Antwerp, where we were working on are working on the east side of the city, and where in the beginning there was a very clear image for the people linked to this project of the main goal. What we need to do is hide this infrastructure as much as possible, to almost erase it, if possible, by roofing it, by building parks and berms around it. So the less impact visually and mentally it has on our surroundings, the better. I think one of the crucial moments is when, and it was not only us, it was part of the civil movements, part of people of the city, engineers who are busy with planning the project, when the shift was made into just erasing it and creating a beautiful park, so to speak, into what productive aspects can a project like this bring along. And then we're talking about if you can implement a logistics center closer to the neighborhood linked to the infrastructure, both, for example, to the highway infrastructure, but also to the public transport infrastructure, then you, for example, allow bigger trucks which actually have a bigger impact on a neighborhood than the highway behind the neighborhood by passing through little streets or whatever. You actually allow them to have a hinge in between the going through logic of a highway, the high-speed logic, and the logic of a neighborhood, which is at a slower speed, which needs to produce another quality. So all of a sudden, instead of just erasing something and creating a park, we were talking about a hinge a logistical center, for example, that could create benefits for a neighborhood, but also was part of this functioning of the flows in the city. In the neighborhood next to it or the surroundings, if there's, for example, a water problem of the fact that when hard rains fall, the streets were flooded, the basements were flooded, which was also linked to the highway because the highway infrastructure implemented a very hard rupture in the groundwater table. But it's something that in the surroundings of the highway, we could start to deal with. We could start to create answers by creating water buffer, for example, and that water buffer could take up the overload or the problematics in the neighborhood. But that water buffer could then also function as more an ambient experience, a sort of water park or something that could start to function on a different level. So I think going away from hiding the infrastructure as much as possible, we made the shift together with a lot of people to using the infrastructure as much as possible and seeing it as an opportunity.
The point is, what I'm trying to make is that all of that, even if people didn't actually know how, created an atmosphere among all the stakeholders. You know, also, let's say the people that were in government and the people who had to give the budgets, that they would never be able to go through with something they actually needed in order to have the city or the traffic in the city and the car traffic in the city at a level which would be acceptable and not just stopped everywhere. This was the general aim of many people, and they realized that they would not be able to do that in the old fashion. They would need to do that by creating a consensus among all the stakeholders. And this is where we come in as, let's say, as specialists, trying to, through urban design, find this consensus, which is basically always a win-win situation. First of all, I believe in processes that do not take too long, you know, that are intensive, whereby people do not forget the next time what was said earlier. If you do that, you find out that at a certain moment, there is a sort of an aha experience, you know? Well, hopefully.
One is don't build a highway in the city, but make it a proper urban project. Secondly is try to contribute to the health of the people living surrounding the infrastructure. I like especially the case study of the A4 in Schiedam. It's a chunk of national highway, which was also tunneled. And what I especially like about it is that they used it to make new ecological connections between both sides. Very nice polder landscape, but they also inserted sport facilities for the local inhabitants. And they did it by using this kind of intelligent section. As you can see here, this is the section they needed for the through traffic. In and out of the tunnel, but they made this section a little bit bigger, as you can see here. At some points, they instituted parking in it, and in other chunks of the highway, they put sports facilities in it, even a track. Spaces in it, or a squash space is in the tunnel. So they kind of over-dimensioned the tunnel, the infrastructure tunnel, to insert sport facilities. And finally, design the infrastructure future-proof. Try to kind of integrate or make space for technologies maybe we don't even know today. Mobility is changing, infrastructure is changing. We don't know how it's going to change, but make sure that the infrastructure you're designing, the section you're designing, is up for that kind of change.
Nobody has ever taken us seriously.
Okay.
You know, every Scrum starts with taking people seriously. I don't have to tell you this probably, Mr. Dietrich, but this is something that is so seldom in our day and age, you know. Everybody thinks he or she knows everything, you know, that their position is always the right one, and they're defending always their position. The point is not, and I firmly believe that today we have to leave our securities behind in order to reach a middle position, which then allows things to go forward.